Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show, Red Pill Edition. I'm your host, Leon Jones. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about governments because it's very important that you, as a voter, understand what type of government you're getting when you are either informed or not informed. But I'm going to dedicate this video to a lot of your uninformed voters by titling this video, Tyranny Loves Uninformed Voters. Tyranny loves uninformed voters. Now, what I'm going to tell you when it comes to government, there are basically 10 types of governments. I'm going to give you the ones I know offhand. Now, when you are an uninformed voter, you're going to run into the first type of government. That's called an anarchy. Now, when somebody is an anarchist, and I'll give you an example of anarchy that's taking place right now, look at your Antifa and your BLM. When you deal with anarchy, you're basically trying to overthrow the government that you currently have in place to replace it with something different. Now, groups like Antifa and BLM rely heavily on Marxism. And they want to utilize Cloward Pivens. And if you are not familiar with Cloward Pivens, I've talked about Cloward Pivens many times in my videos. Cloward Pivens were professors, I believe they were in the political science arena in Harvard back in the 60s. And their theory was to collapse the system and start something else. And what they wanted to start was socialism. But again, when you deal with anarchy, you're basically one who is lawless. You don't believe in the laws of your current government. You don't believe in the system of the current government. Now, here in America, we are not a democracy. We are a republic. We are a republic, but we have Democrats and Republicans. Now, when I talk about republic, what we do as voters, we go out and we vote for candidates who represent us. Now, why do we do that? Well, we do that because we have one capital, and that's Washington, D.C. Well, with 330 million people, if we want to get something done, it would be too many of us to storm the Capitol to get something done. Also, out of 330 million, we have maybe 1/3 of that who is not eligible to vote. But again, when you deal with a republic, you deal with representative government. Now, when you deal with democracy, it's for the people. Now, you have to be careful when we talk about democracy. That's where socialism occurs, because the way a democracy is supposed to work is everybody gets an equal say. It's almost like a laissez-faire type of government. Well, when you deal with laissez-faire, that's French for lazy. But that's the democratic style of leadership. Let me correct myself. That's the democratic style of leadership where there is no one at the top. We all have equal power. That doesn't make sense because, for the most part, There are a number of us who don't understand what government is. And I am bringing this video to you because this is like a voter one-on-one video to tell you what you are voting for when you're uninformed. Because there are so many millennials, some Gen Xers, and some older individuals who love tyranny. And you have this pastor out there. African Americans, some of you just should not vote. Down in Georgia, you're going to vote for that broke ass preacher named Raphael Warnock, and he believes in abortion. He doesn't believe in the military, but yet some of his kinfolk were in the military. But you're going to vote for that guy. And I always say the worst people who are in government are your liberal blacks and your liberal whites. These are the individuals who want to keep you poor. These are the individuals who can speak very well. They want to tell you what you want to hear. But as a voter, you got to challenge your elected officials. But many of you don't, particularly African American people. Because the next type of government I'm going to tell you about is a monarchy. Now, a monarchy is a king, and this is what America separated itself from. This is why they had the Boston Tea Party. This is why they had the Constitution of the United States. To keep everything balanced so we do not have a dictatorship when it comes to our government. But yet, when you don't challenge your government officials, you give them more power than they really need. We as people have the power. We don't know how to use it. And when it comes to tyranny, this is where tyranny loves ignorance. Because for the most part, this country has a lot of ignorant or non-informed voters. And when you deal with a monarchy, you deal with a king. And the king has all the power. You have no power. That's like communism. But there are a number of individuals who embrace Marxism and communism and socialism. Because now, as we talk about communism on the left, what about the right? Because you have two sides of a coin. And there could be bad implications when it comes to government on each side of the coin. So I'm going to explain the next type of government to you that a lot of you don't even know about. But if you're from the Middle East, you do know about it. It's called a theocracy. Now, theocracy is an extreme right-wing government. And when I talk about anything dealing with theo, I'm talking about divinity. I'm talking about God, like theology, the school of theology. This is where a number of your pastors come from. So when you deal with a theocracy, you're dealing with a government that is heavily involved in religion, and they're going to utilize that religion to cause corruption. And this is what they have in the Middle East. And when you have a theocracy, you don't have a civil government. It is collectivism. In fact, a theocracy is basically the flip side of communism. It's basically a tyrannical government. The same people that you have in power in the Middle East are just like Hugo Chavez, Fidel Castro, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, Lenin. These are the individuals that are very tyrannical, and you get no say. But as a voter, you must understand this, because if America is to go, what are you going to have? Because basically, America is the freest country in the world. This is why globalism doesn't work. This is why a number of individuals who are in NATO said Donald Trump was a dangerous man. Why? Because for the most part, the individuals who are part of these regimes come from dictatorships. They're socialists. And if you go north up to Canada, and if you go 7 hours across the pond to the UK, you deal with socialism. Now, when you have a government that is built on socialism, you basically have officials who redistribute the resources to create a utopian society. Now, in the real world, there is no such thing as egalitarianism. It is all fake. What the Democrats want in this country is egalitarianism. They want everything to be equal. And this is why a number of them, for the most part, utilized COVID-19 as a weapon. Why? Because they can go behind the scenes and utilize their power to implement their socialist policies. And something else to tell you, why do you think we're all wearing masks? Because for the most part, the people on the left have you convinced that wearing a mask is going to stop the coronavirus. It is not going to stop the coronavirus. In fact, there are tests that have been proven when it comes to this mask that the face diaper that you wear does not stop the coronavirus. In fact, the data that came out by the CDC explained that when you are a young person, you have basically a 99.5% chance to survive. If you're in your 50s, it goes down to around 99.3 or 99.4. And if you are 70 above, you still have a 96% chance of living. But you would not know that because you're not informed. And the media, the communists in this country, BLM in this country, Antifa, they love tyranny. And the funny thing about tyranny is BLM raised, was it $10 billion in 6 months? Where's all that money going? The money went to the Democratic Party. And there's some people who wish for this communism because they believe in getting something free. Well, if you look at the black leaders on that Zoom meeting, Joe Biden yelled at them. And he said African Americans are going to have to work with brown people, the Latinos. So again, because you African Americans were uninformed, you went out and you voted for something you always vote for, and that's called the Democratic Party, the Plantation Party. And what did they do? They gave you more promises and delivered no gold. But because of the ignorance of you African American women and you men and some of you white liberals out there, we're going to fall back into a socialization or a socialist country for the most part. We're going to go back to the days where the economy is going to grow very slowly. You're not going to get your free college. Joe Biden wants the taxpayers to pay for abortions. I don't agree with that. In other words, Planned Parenthood is going to be subsidized by we taxpayers. But because you uninformed voters watch too much TV, because for the most part, I'm going to the African Americans, particularly the African American women and some of the older African Americans. They're the ones who watch all the TV. They don't challenge anything that's being said. They don't even know what they're voting for. They're always voting against something. But in the end, they're still stuck in the ghettos. They're still stuck on welfare. Number of the African Americans who believe in socialism, because the Black Panther movement, that comes from a Marxist movement. Has anybody heard of Saul Alinsky? If you don't know who Saul Alinsky was a professor from Chicago. He wrote the rules for radicals. And one of his rules was to, well, what you got to do to get people to think with a corrupt or communist mind is you got to nudge them. Check out my video I did on the 12 Rules of Radicals by Saul Alinsky. Because when you tie communism, you tie socialism together, you tie a theocracy together, you got the governments that are very destructive. These governments have killed millions of people. You look at Pol Pot, killed millions of people in Cambodia. Mao Zedong. You had people like Valerie Jarrett and some officials in the Obama administration who loved Mao Zedong. I bet you they don't even know who Mao Zedong was. Well, he was a Chinese dictator. And if you look at what's going on now, Joe Biden and his son are definitely in bed with China. They're friends to China. In fact, the Democratic Party is in bed with China because the Democratic Party believes in communism. Now, for you individuals who have never lived under tyranny, why don't you go over there for 30 days and live under those regimes? You want to talk about poor? Those governments don't give their people anything. No welfare, no child support, nothing. You're poor. But yet, when it comes to the dictatorships or tyrannical regimes, those regimes have all the bureaucrats with the power. There is no representation from the people. And the bureaucrats have a high standard of living. Now, let me bring on another government to you. It's called an oligarchy. Now, an oligarchy is basically represented by people who have status, wealth, education. Now, here in the United States, I do not believe that we will go full-blown socialism. But what I do believe in is we will have less choice. The companies with all the power would probably violate the antitrust laws because they have the money, and they would create monopolies and duopolies. And I'm talking about your Amazons and your Walmarts, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your corporate media, because they're full of oligarchs. Your Bill Gates, your George Soros. These are the individuals who basically utilize their money to pay the salaries of some of your AGs in states like Pennsylvania and Missouri. Mark Zuckerberg, he's the one that funded a lot of official poll workers in the blue states. He's the one that had the mail-in boxes for ballots delivered to the cities in the blue states. You have Google, which YouTube is part of Google. Well, when it comes to making YouTube videos, we have algorithms that are created by the oligarchy to monitor what we say. And if we say anything that they deem incorrect, we're going to get our channels flagged, or we'll get a warning, or we'll get the video taken away. In other words, the people who are rich basically have all the wealth in this country, and it's not, you talk about redistribution of wealth, well, that wealth will never be redistributed. Why? Because oligarchs want to keep their money. So if you have a job, what happens in an oligarchy, there's no competition. Small businesses basically are 60% of the economy. So that means your oligarchs are a smaller portion of this economy. So when you have just corporations alone and no competition, you're going to have a lot of people competing for jobs. And when that happens, wages are going to be kept low. This is why both Democrats and Republicans, they want free labor. The Republicans want the free labor. The Democrats want the votes. But if you look at both parties, they're both corrupt. This is why I'm telling you, uninformed voters, you need to start reading and get away from the TV, and don't believe what somebody says just because they look good. And for you old heads out there, that rhetoric really gets old. Well, oh, he sounds good. He looks good. I'm going to vote for him. What about his policies? See, when I go and vote somebody, I vote for First Amendment. I vote for Second Amendment. I vote for an economy. I vote for competition, for free market. Now, if the individual doesn't sound professional, I can deal with that. Talking about, i.e., Donald Trump. But if he's creating an environment for me to live better, his policies help me, his policies are against the welfare state, his policies are against socialism, his policies are against the tyrannical government, that's going to be the guy I vote for. Why? Because his policies are enhancing my life. Now, when it comes to a theocracy, and this is what's going to happen if America falls, you're going to go to socialism by way of Canada, England, and then you have other countries who are communists like China, Venezuela. You even have Cuba. And then if you go to the Middle East, you have your theocracy. So when it comes to globalism, period, if you look at all of the governments, most of them are dictatorships. Dictatorships are dangerous because you're not allowed to challenge your government officials. So you don't have any free speech. You don't even have media. When it comes to dictatorships, they're going to give you what they want to give you, and you better be quiet because they could take your life. If you don't believe me, you ask the people over there in Cambodia, some in China. You ask the people who came from regimes of Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez. But for a number of you uninformed voters here in America, why do you want a dictatorship? Dictatorships talk about making everything fair, but everything will not be fair. But why are you all so obsessed with Marxism and communism and socialism? Is it that you're too lazy to go out there and be innovative and create something for yourself? Are you entitled to getting the money that I work hard for while you sit on your behind and make babies? Or while you sit on your behind at your mom's house and you live off the government? The problem with politicians in this country is they love the uninformed voters, because the uninformed voter is, for the most part, very gullible. Again, I've given you the types of government that you're voting for when you're uninformed. And for individuals who live in this country, in my humble opinion, you shouldn't even be voting, period. A number of you don't know the three branches of government. You don't understand the Electoral College. You don't understand ballot initiatives. You don't know the history of the Democratic or Republican parties. A number of you are watching television and you're believing everything that the television tells you. A number of you uninformed voters are very lazy. You're listening to a communist professor. A number of you are drawn to an ideology that is destructive. Now, somebody might ask me, well, how is a theocracy destructive? Well, again, a theocracy is collectivism on the right. Those officials come from the church. They're clergy. So they're going to use religion. And what happens, go to the Middle East. You look at women. They're not free. And see these clergymen who believe in theocracy have a dictatorship over their women. Again, Middle Eastern theocracies are just like communist Cuba. They're on opposite sides of the coin. But a number of you who live in America want that kind of government. Many of you have been spoiled by this country. You don't understand what free market is. You don't understand what freedom is. You hate this country, but yet you've benefited from this country. In the end, what you need to do is look at what you're voting for. Challenge your officials. And I believe what the government here, since it is representative government, we're not a democracy. We will never be a democracy. We are a republic. Our officials are elected by us, citizen voters. It is our job to challenge our elected officials. Many of us won't do that because many of us don't know how to do that. These officials are telling us what we need to have. No. We're your boss. But in order for us to take our power back as people, we need to get these uninformed voters straightened out, because these uninformed voters don't like this country, but they love tyranny, but they've never lived under tyranny. And for you folks in Georgia, this Ossoff, this John Ossoff, and this Raphael Warnock, again, he's another broke down preacher, and you cannot believe these pastors, because these pastors sound good, but they're not godly. You listen to the sounds of Raphael Warnock, Democrat pastor of a church in Georgia. He's running for Senate. But there are going to be a number of you black women and older black men and older black women who are going to vote for that guy. Why? Because he looks good and he sounds good. Look at his policies. Look at your life. You think your life is going to be better under tyranny? I believe in free market. We got the best type of government, but it's our job to challenge this government. Many other countries live under tyranny. They live under communism. They live under socialism. They live under theocracy. Many of us here in America don't appreciate what we have. Some of us hate this country. they benefit from this country. And in the end, a tyrannical government will never work here because there are too many of us who believe in freedom, too many of us who have fought for freedom. And it's our job to be informed voters. We need to know who we're voting for, and we need to vote for policies. We don't need to vote on style. It's not about feelings. It's about making our lives better. Because in the end, as a voter, I want freedom, not tyranny. Tyranny is very destructive. And if you don't believe me, you look at these other countries. You have a number of people coming over here so they can be part of this American dream. Now, some of you may not like America, but in the end, you're benefiting from America because really, deep down inside, you want freedom, not tyranny, but you just want everything from everybody. Because in your mind, you believe you have the power. But in the end, we the people have the power. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some education, check out the Mind of STEM channel. On that channel, I talk about subjects like industrial engineering, cybersecurity, information technology, and etymology. On that channel, I'll give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. And you can check me out on Blog Talk Radio, where I get into these types of subjects more in depth. Subjects are too hot for YouTube. The guest calling number, 215-383-5785. And if you cannot find me on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, you can check me out on Twitter. Now, I'm looking to go on to Parler, MeWe, and Rumble. And also, I don't ask for too much. Try to donate. Check out my PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App. And at the end of the day, I'm going to leave you with this. Be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Once again, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious night. God bless you. I'm out.